Okay, let's talk about some really big questions. Why does Christianity even have a concept like hell? And maybe more importantly, how does that connect to things like salvation and having real assurance in your faith? Well, today we're going to dive right into these deep theological waters. We'll be using an article by Adam Malin as our guide, and it's really a journey from a pretty tough topic, judgment, all the way to a place of peace. So, the source material we're looking at kicks off with this really powerful verse from the Apostle Paul. And it gets right to the point, doesn't it? It immediately frames the whole conversation. This tells us we're not here for some kind of morbid curiosity or scary stories. No, the idea is to understand something that's seen as having eternal significance, something that's meant to have a direct impact on how we actually live our lives. All right, so here's our roadmap for this journey. First up, we're going to ask, why even talk about hell? Then, we'll dig into what the Bible actually says about it. After that, we'll look at the cross as a rescue, and then tackle that really tough question, can salvation be lost? And we'll wrap it all up by looking at how you can find your own assurance. All right, section 1, why talk about hell? I mean, it's a fair question, right? Why bring up a topic that's so heavy? Well, the source we're looking at argues that the whole point in the Bible isn't just to scare people. It's actually meant to guide them. It has what's called a pastoral purpose, which really just means it's designed to help and protect. So the big idea here is that talking about judgment isn't supposed to be the end of the conversation. It's not meant to just leave you feeling anxious or hopeless. Instead, it's presented as more of a warning sign, the kind that motivates you to turn towards a specific place of safety and peace. And in the Christian view, that place of safety is found in Christ. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What does the Bible actually say? It's time to move past maybe some of the cartoons or pop culture ideas and look at how the source material defines this concept of judgment. The source is super direct here. It defines hell not as some kind of metaphor, but as a real, conscious, and just punishment. And there's a specific theological logic behind that. The idea is this. If God is infinite and perfectly holy, then a sin against him isn't just a small mistake. It carries an infinite weight. And because of that, the consequence, to be just, has to match that infinite weight. And check this out. These words aren't tucked away in some obscure part of the Bible. The source makes a point to say that this is Jesus himself speaking. He's directly contrasting these two eternal destinations. And what's really fascinating from a language perspective is that the original Greek word for everlasting, it's the exact same word used for both the punishment and the life. Kind of makes you think, right? The Bible uses all kinds of powerful images to talk about this. It's not just one thing. You've got relational language, like being told to depart from me, that's about exclusion. You've got sensory language, like outer darkness, which gives you a feeling of shame and misery. And then you have that really vivid imagery, like a lake of fire. The source argues that these aren't meant to be a literal roadmap, but when you put them all together, they paint this picture of something profound, something multifaceted. Okay, this brings us to a phrase you've probably heard a million times. Hell is separation from God. It's super common, but the article we're exploring argues that we need to be really, really careful with what that actually means. It needs a crucial clarification. And this is where that clarification comes in. The idea is that God is omnipresent. He's everywhere, so you can't actually be separated from his existence or escape his reach. The separation, then, isn't from God's being there, but from his favorable presence, from his fellowship and grace. Think of it like this. It's the difference between being in the presence of a judge who is delivering a sentence versus being in the presence of a loving father who welcomes you home. In both cases, you're in their presence, but the experience is, well, completely different. Okay, so if all that stuff about judgment is the problem that's laid out, the biblical narrative provides a very specific, very powerful solution. This is the big turning point in the story. So that leads us to the big question, right? If sin against a holy God deserves judgment, is that it? Is there any way out? Is there a rescue? The source we're looking at basically says that the entire Christian message is the definitive yes to that question. And this is the absolute climax of that rescue story. When Jesus cries out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That moment is interpreted as him acting as a substitute, experiencing that exact separation from God's favorable presence that we were just talking about. The idea is that in that moment, he's taking the full weight of that judgment on himself. And here's the payoff. The cross isn't just held up as some inspiring act of love. It's framed as a direct, effective rescue mission. The text says believers are saved from wrath, and it's very specific about how. Through him. It's a direct cause and effect. So, naturally, this brings up a really personal question, one that can cause a lot of anxiety for people. Once someone is saved, is that it? Is that security permanent? Or is it something you can lose? To get at this, the source makes a really important distinction. Think of it in two columns. On one side, you have what's called the visible church. This is basically everyone who's outwardly connected to Christianity. They go to church, they identify as Christian. The text says some of these people can and do fall away. But then, on the other side, you have those who are described as being truly united to Christ, people with a genuine inward faith. And the argument is that this group will be kept by God and will ultimately persevere. And the whole foundation for this idea of security is built on promises like this one, straight from Jesus. I mean, the language is pretty absolute, isn't it? They shall never perish. The point here is that the security doesn't depend on the believer's ability to hang on tight, but on the shepherd's promise to hold on to them. Now, this is a super important clarification. The source is quick to point out that real believers can still sin, sometimes in really big ways. And when they do, they can absolutely lose the joy of their salvation, that feeling of peace and closeness to God. But look at David's prayer after he committed a terrible sin. He prays, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation." He doesn't ask for salvation back, just the joy of it. The implication is that the foundation was still there, even if the feeling was gone. Okay, let's bring this all home now. We're moving into the final part of our journey, where we see how all of this big theology is supposed to translate into actual personal confidence and peace. And this is a really practical, caring point. The advice from the source is basically, stop trying to look into some secret heavenly book to see if your name is written there. That's just going to make you anxious. Instead, the focus gets shifted away from looking inside yourself and trying to figure it all out and pointed towards something solid and external, Christ, and the promises found in the gospel. So, with that in mind, the source lays out this incredibly practical 4-step pathway for anyone struggling with this. And the order is so important. Step 1, look outward to Christ. Don't start by looking in. Then, 2, rest on the gospel promise itself. Just take it at its word. It's only after those first 2 steps that you get to 3, examine your life for evidence of grace. And finally, step 4, actively use the means of grace, things like prayer, reading the Bible, being part of a church, to build on that assurance. And this is where our whole journey lands. This final verse is presented as the ultimate anchor for a worried soul. The entire path, from understanding judgment all the way to finding assurance, is kind of boiled down into this one simple command: look to Jesus. He's called the author and finisher of our faith. I mean, think about that. If he's the one who starts it and the one who finishes it, what does that say about how secure your faith really is? That right there, that's presented as the ultimate source of assurance.